Our next guest imports more than 90% of his products from China, calls the tariff threat to his business a, quote, nightmare, and the new tariffs on his products set to take hold in December. Joining us now is Jay Foreman, CEO of Basic Fun, maker of toys like Light Bright, Connects building sets, Lincoln Logs, and more. Jay, 90% of what you sell is made in China?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, there's really no production base in the U.S. anymore. Most of the toy factories that were here left in the 80s during the Reagan administration. So over the last 30 years, we've developed an incredibly efficient supply chain in China, and that's where almost everybody in the United States and in the world makes toys.
So how quickly can you get it out?
Well, I mean, I don't really think we can get it out very quickly at all. I mean, you guys do stories all the time. If you've ever seen how factories operate in India, I'm not really sure the American consumer is ready to start making toys in the kind of conditions that you might see in factories in India. And there's no labor here in the United States to manufacture toys. So it seems like the administration is really creating a problem that has no solution except raising prices on everybody and taking profits away from companies and the employees of those companies.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, if you're not diverting factories, what are you doing? You're preparing to just pass it all on to the consumer?
Well, we're not necessarily, don't necessarily have the ability to pass it on. A lot of our retail partners are telling us that we're not allowed to pass along. They won't accept price increases. And if that happens, what that means is that small and medium-sized and even large businesses all over the country are going to have to eat that tariff and not be able to pass it off. So what does that do? That means that we have less money to invest and expand. We have less money to give promotions and raises and Christmas bonus to our employees, and we have less tax dollars to pass back to the American government. So, you know, the tariffs, as was mentioned earlier, aren't paid by China. They're paid by American businesses. Eventually, the prices will get passed along to the consumer sometime later next year. But right now, a lot of businesses are going to be suffering, and it's not just business owners. It's everybody within a company that suffers when a company's profits go down and their balance sheet goes out of balance.
You know, the president just tweeted, and I'm paraphrasing here, that you're going to blame tariffs for really what is, and I say you as in a small to medium-sized business, really
Sure.
What is your lack of execution. There it is, actually. You're going to blame yourself for bad management when really it's your own fault. Jay, what do you say to that?
Well, again, I say, what does the president expect us to do? He wants us to bring manufacturing of this nature, things like flip-flops, underwear, socks, toys, back to the United States. At the same time, he's closing up the border. He's telling people that come from countries where low-skilled labor would be making all that product, don't come. We have maximum employment in this country. So what does he expect? He's kind of talking about out of both sides of his mouth. It's sort of like, you know, the neighbors where there's an apple tree in between their property, and they're fighting over the apples that fall on the ground. And the solution is, let's cut down the apple tree so we don't have the problem anymore. I mean, it's really ridiculous. And he's claiming we are efficient businesses. And I would say this to you, you know, his big gripe, as much as anything, because he can't really gripe about labor and employment here because we don't have it and he's closing the border. His biggest gripe is intellectual property. Well, funny, it seems to me that Apple makes all its phones in China, and its biggest store in the world is in China. So if they're really that worried about IP, and companies like Microsoft and Apple and all those are worried about IP, why are they doing so much business in China? So it's really a false argument that he's making, and there's no solution to the problem that he's created.
So what do you, when you forecast for, let's call it the next half of next year, certainly after December 15th, what are your expectations in terms of overall demand for the products that you're selling here?
Well, the natural rule is when prices go up, demand goes down. Person will buy more toys at $10 or $20 than they will at 20 or 30. So volume, individual volume will go down. Certainly as prices go up, the consumer will become more concerned and they'll tighten up. And of course, the knock-on effect of all the companies and the employees who work for all those companies, if you know your company is being attacked and its profit margins are being taken away by the government and maybe passed along to large agribusinesses, you know that it's going to be a lean Christmas. So maybe you're not buying so many toys. Maybe you're not going to buy that car. And this is not just a couple of thousand or 10,000 companies. This is the millions of employees who work for all those companies that are affected by these tariffs. It's just outrageous. You know, we're in South Florida here right now. We're watching a hurricane come in, and this tariff situation is like looking at those spaghetti models. And every day you're wondering where the storm is going to go, where the hurricane is going to hit. How do we plan? That's what we're going through.
Jay, what's the price sensitivity of your customers to your products, do you think? In other words, if you modeled out what kind of price increases ultimately you might have to impose and whether, in fact, that really will materially impact demand?
Well, you know, the price impact will be directly reflected by the tariffs. If it's 15 to 30% tariffs, prices will certainly go up 15 to 30% because it's a direct tax, almost like a VAT tax you would find in Europe and in Asia on the products. So the price of products will go up. And if the price of products go up 15 or 30%, paychecks aren't going up. The president's bragging about, paychecks are finally going up. That's great. All the money that people are making from getting a little bit more money in their pay packet is going to go to more higher prices on the shelves. So, there's a direct correlation on the increase of pricing, and as prices go up, consumers will spend less. There's no doubt about it. I think prices will go up on all the goods imported from China. That's not just toys. That's phones and tableware, sneakers, blue jeans, you name it. And they'll go up 15 to 30% in the second half of next year. No doubt about it. It's got to go somewhere.
Is there any hope for you moving your supply chain, getting out of China? I mean, I know the toy industry is China, as you said earlier, but can't you just think about getting out of there?
Well, we can, but think about it this way. Mr. Trump is the great deal maker. Eventually, the assumption is he's going to make a deal. So we start to move our supply chain to places like Vietnam and India, and then all of a sudden he makes a deal. And we've got our supply chain on the move, and all of a sudden now India is the enemy, and Vietnam is the target. So again, without a rationalization in this trade policy, there's really no way to plan. So I can move my production, but think about Vietnam. Vietnam is a tenth the size of China. If you moved 5% of the production out of China into Vietnam, Vietnam would be maxed out in a year. And they would not want to necessarily be making flip-flops and teddy bears. They want to be making telephones and cars and consumer electronic products. So then we'd be squeezed again. We have to move to India. And the president has already, talked here and there on the edges about India and trade with India. So as soon as that happens and we start to move, he's going to put a target on somebody else's back, and where do we go from there?